Air pollution is particles and gases in the air that might impact on human health. Now, those particles might be naturally produced. They may be dust storms, it might be a forest fire, or they can be produced by human activity. And that can be anything from the emissions coming out of the back of our buses and our cars. It could be industrial emissions. So air pollution can have a number of effects on the human body. To start with, the respiratory tract, our throat and our mouth, can be irritated by some pollutants. And that can be a problem if you're a healthy individual, but if you have asthma or COPD, for example, that can lead to quite severe complications. And that's a real restriction in the airways and the ability for you to breathe. We can also get pollution into our lungs, and that means that our lungs become congested, and that can cause problems for anybody with particularly vulnerable respiratory systems. But some particulates and some gases can change the chemistry of our blood and change the chemistry of our bodies, which means that then starts to affect other organs that aren't directly linked to our respiratory system. So really small particles have been shown to have impacts on the brain and affect some neurological disorders, and dementia is one that's been critically seen to be affected. The other is the heart, and some cardiovascular conditions have been linked closely with certain chemistries of particulates. As a member of the public, there's a number of things we can do to manage our exposure. The first is to understand it and to know it, to realise when concentrations might be high enough to impact on human health. So getting yourself an app on your phone that tells you when the areas might be polluted, getting a forecast that you trust that tells you what the next few days will look like, and therefore whether there are particular weather conditions coming that will lead to high pollution, so you can understand when you can and should take action about that. When we all go outside, we want to encourage as much active travel as possible, and in general it's good for the human body to take as much activity as possible. So that's walking and cycling. So if you can, avoid using the car, avoid using modes of transport that don't exercise the body, so go walking and go cycling if at all possible. But if you have a condition where you are susceptible to pollution, that's asthma and COPD, just be careful of when the forecasts will say that there's going to be high levels of pollution, because you don't want to be exercising, you don't want to be breathing in deeply in areas or at times of really high pollution. So there's a real timing element of when your activity should be and when you need to be very careful. There's also the spatial element. So next to major roads and next to big industry, there will be more pollution. If you can take a route that might take a little bit longer, but takes you away from those major roads, takes you through the parks, takes you into more rural areas, there will be lower pollution. And again, some apps will tell you where that low pollution can be found. So if you are vulnerable or you just wish to reduce your exposure to pollution, then do understand that spatial context and try and keep away from busy major roads. In general, the amount of noise gives you an indication of the amount of pollution. Finally, on domestic heating and wood-burning stoves, if you can avoid using them, please do so if at all possible. They will produce particulates in the home, and they will also increase the amount of particulates for you and your neighbours. So if you can avoid using wood-burning stoves, please do so. The World Health Organization has recently published new guidelines on safe levels of pollution, and they are particularly for PM 2.5, so really fine particles, and nitrogen dioxide. Now, these levels are much lower than our current regulatory limits, and they give us guidance on how much we need to now evolve as a country away from levels that were set many, many years ago and were aligned with the European Union to a new set of levels where we may be aligned with the World Health Organization and cleaner environments for our country and our future generations. So we have a responsibility as the public to say we want these cleaner levels. It's not just about compliance with an international standard that we used to look at, but it's about ambitiously aiming for cleaner air, levels that are shown to be safe for our next generations by the World Health Organization, and asking our government to get those levels, put the investment in where it can be, put the investment into cleaner transport, into healthier cities, and meet those World Health Organization levels, and not our historic regulatory frameworks that are these days relatively easy to hit. We've made some significant commitments on climate as a country in the last few years. We're really looking to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases we emit to reduce the long-term impact on our climate. Now, these are very important objectives, and they do have similarities with our pollution control objectives. When we're looking to reduce the amount of artificial pollutants in our atmosphere, we're generally trying to reduce the amount of hydrocarbons being burnt and the amount of petrol and diesel that we use for our transport systems, for our energy generation, and for other parts of our human existence. So as we reduce those energy consumptions, that transport, we improve the forecast for the climate as a whole, our 20-year, our 30-year forecast for what our climate might be, our temperature changes over those timescales. But at the same time, we improve the air that we breathe 5 minutes later. We improve the air for the pupils in the school just downwind. So our climate objectives and our air quality objectives are critically linked, even though one is looking 50 years in the future, the other has implications in 5 minutes' time. Those of us looking at air quality are really critically focused on reducing the amount of emissions that happen close to our schools, close to our hospitals, in places where those emissions are going to have a direct impact on human health, but it also benefits future generations through reducing the change in our climate. So as a local authority, we can improve the amount of information there is for the public so that they can manage their exposure to air quality. We have public portals as EarthSense, which show maps of pollution concentrations across cities, show when that concentration might get below critical levels and enable a higher level of activity, and to encourage those decisions that might improve pollution for the wider neighbourhoods. For example, advice on wood-burning stoves or advice on travel modes and use of vehicles and public transport. So as a local authority area, we can do significant amounts to improve the amount of information we provide to people to make better decisions, but also to help guide those with critical health conditions to make sure that we have medication when we need it and we understand the amount of activity and the amount of risk we have at any particular time. For those transport companies, there's an awful lot that can be done because a large part of our pollution challenge comes from our transport system. So anybody with responsibility for managing road infrastructure, managing the uptake of electric vehicles and our fleet profile, that is an area where we can make very significant changes. Anything that encourages clean travel, clean use, active travel choices across our cities and across our industries will make a very significant difference. For schools, we have a number of opportunities to improve how we've done things in the past. For pupils in schools, it's critical to understand what the concentration of pollutants is in the playground, in the classroom, in the whole area around a school, particularly for drop-off times, how much exposure there is when you're dropped off around moving vehicles, when you're waiting outside of school, and then as you go into school, while there's a lot of congestion and movement of vehicles outside. Again, there's a role for parents to try and reduce the amount of vehicles are used if at all possible, particularly close to schools. Maybe think of a fence around a school of 100 metres, try not to go within 100 metres of your school with any vehicle that might be polluting. Obviously walk or cycle if you possibly can, but if not, drop off a little away from the school gates if at all possible. For teachers and governors of schools, give whatever advice you can, give information to pupils to understand why the use of vehicles is an issue for pollution and what that pollution is doing to the human body. So have that as part of the training, part of the curriculum, just advise pupils on healthy ways of getting to school and the importance of clean air to the health of future generations. For construction companies, the management of dust and construction-related pollution is a major activity. And again, understanding when the meteorological conditions, the weather is going to be particularly critical for those emissions is valuable. Therefore, dust suppression, getting that optimised, making sure the use of the sprayers is at the right times and in the right places to protect vulnerable individuals from harmful particulates is absolutely critical. And again, we have monitoring systems and modelling systems to help support those activities. Again, the construction sector has responsibilities for the public at large as well as those people working on that construction site. And we do have mobile sensors, and we do have sensors that can be placed around fence lines, for example, to understand the exposure of those people within it and those people beyond it. Thank you for watching today's video. There are actions for all of us to take to make a cleaner and healthier environment for us all to live and thrive. If we can make these changes, we make a safer and healthier world for ourselves and future generations.